dear learners, last time we did something about the movements on climate change in India. Let us continue with that. As India is a country with various different cultures and regions, it is only natural that there should be grassroots climate movements in India. So the first one would be related to water. There have been water conservation mediums and movements in India. India has seen several grassroots movements focusing on water conservation, which is closely tied to climate change adaptation. For example, the Pani Panchayat in Maharashtra, Johad's water harvesting movement in Rajasthan, led by Rajendra Singh, focus on traditional water management techniques to combat water scarcity exacerbated by climate change. So, such movements are on the rise because of the shortage of water, because of the climate impacts in the desert areas, and as we also learnt in previous lessons, that these needs, these issues, when they get very aggravated, when the problems are excessive, then they take the form of movements where people try to voice their concerns and put pressure on the governments to do something about the issue. And as we already know, youth is the strongest force in the world, and there are youth forces all over the world. There are youth movements all over the world who are trying to address climate change. And Greta Thunberg is an important name in this, inspired by global youth movements like Fridays for Future, which was started by Greta Thunberg. Indian youth activists are increasingly becoming involved in climate action. Activists like Disha Ravi, part of Fridays for Future movement in India, have organized climate strikes and advocacy campaigns. As India has been a country that is largely agricultural and dependent on natural resources, so also when one switches to other forms of fuel, it takes some time. India's energy transition and economic development is important, and the word transition is important here because the switching over is not so easy. So one has to balance development and climate action. With millions still living in poverty, the country is heavily reliant on coal for its energy needs, despite growing renewable energy sectors. So we already know, if we look at the food stalls on the roadsides, in any part of India, we see how coal and wood is being used. It is the same for many industries, and even small industries which are highly dependent on coal and on these non-renewable sources of energy. So the switch is difficult and it takes time, but in India there are signs of change gradually coming in as solar power is taking over, as it is cheaper. It is now visible in many villages. Economic growth with climate commitments arguing for a just transition that protects workers in carbon intensive industries like coal. So there should be such a transition that the workers do not suffer because of the transition, especially those who are working in carbon intensive industries like coal. And as we discussed earlier also, that energy like solar energy is not viable everywhere. It is different in different parts of the world. For example, in India, we have a lot of sunlight, but in polar regions, in northern countries, in these cold regions, they have limited sunlight. So solar energy is something that they cannot rely too much on. So as India is in question, so here solar energy is something that can really be relied on, and it needs a just transition to it. I mean, with the consideration that the people who are in the agriculture section, the farmers and all, are so heavily dependent on uh, other for um, electricity to get their water, and industry for their chemicals and all. So it's important to transit to a safer form of energy. Commitments to renewable energy, expanding renewable energy. So there have been many movements, and there has been a change of policy in India related to solar energy. So there is the National Solar Mission, the Ujala Yojana. Energy efficient lighting are steps towards reducing the country's carbon footprint. So these are some of the schemes that have been implemented by the government. In COP26 2021, India announced a goal to achieve net zero emissions by 2070, with intermediate goals such as increasing the non-fossil energy capacity to 500 GW by 2030. So India has also made its commitments, and the way it works, the way one country transits to non-renewable resources from renewable resources of energy, that is different. The journey is different for every country because of the geographical landscape, the amount of sunshine, and the weather conditions. There are many things that determine this transition, and even the political setup is important. The cultural and the political setup are also important. Policy and international commitments. Paris Agreement and India's INDCS 2015. India played a significant role in the Paris Agreement in 2015. The countries intended nationally determined contributions include reducing emissions and their intensity by 33 to 35% by 2030, achieving about 40% of electricity capacity from non-fossil fuel sources by 2030, creating an additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon equivalent through afforestation and tree planting by 2030. So there are many policies that are being implemented by the government. Many steps are being taken. Uh, After the Paris Agreement, India committed itself to planning things for the future, to planning for a sustainable future, and so many such policies and schemes are coming up in which there is a consideration of the different kind of people who live in India, understanding that the cities and towns are divided into the rich and the poor, and the needs are different as far as gender is concerned, as far as age is concerned. So the new planning that would be there in the next 10 years or 20 years would be gender sensitive planning, and where the carbon footprint would be lowered and more green areas would be preserved, or there would be uh, re-establishment of green cover. So these are the implementations by the government. What are the future prospects? India's commitment to renewable energy and climate resilience will be critical in the coming decades. So, as we already know, that the climate future is something to think about presently, because if action is not taken now, things will become quite unlivable in the next 50 years or so. The country's focus on solar energy, electric mobility, and sustainable agriculture offers hope for a low carbon future. The role of youth activism, grassroots movements, and technological innovation will also be key in driving the climate change movement forward in India. So, if India is one of the developing countries, it is also one of the countries that is going forward in leaps and bounds towards implementing ways and means to lower the impact of global warming. Nationally determined contributions. In 2022, India updated its NDCs, reaffirming its commitment to renewable energy expansion, electric mobility, and sustainable urban development. The focus is now on accelerating climate action through green growth as part of India's G20 presidency in 2003. So, the focus or emphasis is on green growth, and we can see that the electric mobility is coming in gradually, and the solar power is being used a lot, especially in villages today, and rainwater harvesting is also becoming one of the important parts of house construction in cities. So, all this shows that the government is making space for a sustainable future for not only India but for the world at large. Whatever the goals may be, whatever the steps may be that are being taken in this direction, there will always be challenges. And as I earlier mentioned, there's always been a debate about climate impacts. There's a struggle to deal with capitalist lobbies. But in spite of this, there is a vibrant youth that wants action and wants to make the future sustainable and a better place to live in for them and for the future citizens. What are the challenges like? Energy dependency. India is still reliant on coal for 50% of its energy needs, uh, making it difficult to reduce emissions while maintaining energy security. So, coal is largely used in India, as I just mentioned, in common households, also in street foods around India, um, and other places where fire is needed. Coal is used a lot. So, 50% of the energy that India derives is from non renewable resources. There is another challenge is the air pollution caused by burning these fossil fuels. Also, there are financial constraints. India's ability to meet its climate goals is constrained by financial limitations, with demands for increased climate financing from developed countries to help with mitigation and adaptation efforts. So, we talked about climate justice earlier, that climate financing is also important, where the developed nations have to help the developing nations in meeting these challenges related to climate change. So, unless and until there is unity in the world and the people are united in this goal, it is very difficult to work at climate change, to work to reduce carbon emissions or to reduce the impact of climate change. What are the future prospects? So, as we all know, the future is critical for us in India, but also for the entire world, as it is already predicted that there will be water issues very soon in a decade or two. So, there should be ways to manage water and also ways to sort of use less fossil fuels. So, the country's focus on solar energy, electric mobility, and sustainable agriculture offers hope for a low carbon future. Nevertheless, there are many struggles, but India is showing signs of trying to deal with these issues. So, youth movements also are very important in this direction. One of the most important things in India, which sort of give it its own identity and its character, are the local cultures, the local identities in India, the indigenous cultures. The indigenous cultures have a lot to teach. They are very important as far as India is concerned. These are the tribals or the Adivasis. So there is taking climate change to them and asking them to sort of adapt to new ways of using energy might be difficult. So there is something called indigenous resistance, and environmental movements will have to take them under consideration. And this resistance is not only, we should not see it in a negative way, we can look at it in a very positive way also, because they try to save their area, they try to save the green cover in forest by resisting the cutting down of forests, mining and dam projects. So if they are trying to save their livelihood and their homes, in a way it is something positive, because they are trying to save the forest cover. So some of these important people or activists are Hansda Sovendra Shekhar and Ishtareen Kire. This story, The Adivasi Will Not Dance, written in 2015 by Hansda Sovendra Shekhar, is very important. Let's look into it. The Adivasi Will Not Dance is a short story by Hansda Sovendra Shekhar, in which a dance troupe leader refused to dance at a high profile event. So this was something that was a government event, and he refused to dance. And where did this story come from? The story was inspired by an event in 2013. The President Pranab Mukherjee was visiting Jharkhand to inaugurate a thermal plant project. This project threatened to displace the tribals from their lands. In the story, it is a rebellion of Murmu against the state-sponsored theft of Santhal land. So one can see how literature captures this struggle of the tribals, of the indigenous cultures to defend themselves and to defend their rights, to defend their land. And so this too is a part of literature. And when we talk of movements, movements too are a part of literature. And we can see this is a story, this is a piece of literature which became very important. And the writer himself has received many awards. He is an important writer. So we can see how literature can deal with issues of climate change. And we will discuss later about something about the love of the land as talked by Llewellyn Vaughan Lee. So now let us go to an interview with Llewellyn Vaughan Lee. He is an American writer, a Sufi. He has written many books, and he runs the Golden Sufi Center. His important book, The Cry of the Earth, Spiritual Ecology, The Cry of the Earth, tells us about yet another movement about climate change, another movement that tries to reverse the impact of climate change. And according to spiritual ecology, nature has a spiritual connection with human beings, and what is happening in the present day is something that is upsetting that sacred bond that humans have always had with nature. And his book, Eco Spirituality, The Cry of the Earth, is a collection of essays by various environmentalists around the world and in India. So Vandana Shiva has also included her essay in this, and there are others also. And there is this very important Zen Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, who has also talked about saving the earth, the bells of mindfulness, he says. Those bells are ringing to wake you up, to tell you that you have to save the earth, you have to save your relationship to the earth. And until and unless you think of that bond as sacred, you will not be able to do anything to undo the effects of climate change. So let's go to this interview that was conducted by Sajia Khanam, research scholar, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh, and let's go to that now. So Llewellyn Vaughan Lee, as this introduction tells us, he belongs to the Naqshbandiya Mujahideen Sufi order. He was born in London and in 1953, and he has followed the Naqshbandi Sufi path since he was 19 years old. And he has written several other books, and he founded the Golden Sufi Center in Northern California. So when I read his book, I realized that Sufism is also closely related to land and closely related to the love for the earth, because Sufism talked about the world, about spirituality, about the heart, but this was something that I learned from Vaughan Lee, that we have a spiritual connection to the earth, and Sufism also talks about that connection. So this is the book. If you have a look at it, Spiritual Ecology, The Cry of the Earth. The title is so meaningful that the earth is crying and shedding tears. It is asking you to reconsider your attitude towards it and give it your love and concern, because the relationship between you and the earth is sacred. So there is a historian whose name is Dipesh Chakravarti. He also talks about this relationship between humans and between the earth. And he says that we have separated human history and natural history, though human beings and the earth are related to each other. They are biologically related to each other, but we have separated it. And to begin with, the earth was something that was so large, so unpredictable, and it could conquer human beings. But now everything seems reversed. Now human beings are doing the worst unthinkable thing. They are damaging the earth and ruining the future for themselves. So the contributors who have written essays are all important people here, and all writers, environmentalists, philosophers, even poets. Thich Nhat Hanh, Joanna Macy, and Vandana Shiva, Evelyn Tucker. So there are many. And Vaughan Lee has also contributed an essay in this. So let's begin the interview now. Shazia, what spurred you to write the book Eco-Spirituality, The Cry of the Earth? Vaughan Lee, I became aware in the year 2000 for a shift in consciousness to oneness and awareness of the interconnected nature of the ecosystem. I understood that at the root of the present precarious climate change world was the forgetfulness of the sacred nature of creation, which was central to indigenous traditions. The book is a collection of essays by various spiritual teachers about spiritual perspectives on the present day climate crisis. So we can see he's telling us that the root of the present day climate crisis is our forgetfulness of our sacred relationship and the sacred nature of creation, which was present in indigenous tribes and groups. Shazia, how was your Sufi background influenced by your understanding of the relationship between humanity and the earth. Vaughan Lee. A basic idea in Sufism is unity of being, Vedat al Wujud. It is this mystical understanding of oneness that can heal our relation to the living earth. The present story of separation is destroying the ecosystem. So, it is this separation from this idea of oneness that is destroying us and destroying our earth, of which we are a part. And he talks about a mystical oneness, and which is very essential if one wants to save the earth. But today, what we are seeing is that the earth is just a tool which we use, which we abuse, and then we just discard and leave it the way it is, and we move on to greener pastures. So, this would not be there if we held the earth as sacred and we gave it importance like a mother, and healed it in times of distress or injury, and tried to pay back the earth for what we have got from it. Shazia, how would you explain spiritual ecology? Why do you think it is so important? Vaughan Lee. Spiritual ecology recognizes that the present ecological crisis is a spiritual crisis of forgetfulness of the second nature of creation. Thus, the earth has become a resource to be exploited rather than be revered and respected. The work of spiritual ecology is to reconnect with the sacred and regain a life that is in balance with the earth. So, the most important thing is to consider the earth as sacred, to help to heal the relationship. In ancient times, there was tree worship, there was a constant uh, consideration of sacredness of rivers. All those things are not there when one is into construction of houses, or one is in dealing with properties, or one is building resorts. Then one is not concerned about anything in nature being sacred. So, there are isolated places where nature is still sacred, and those are the spots which are being saved, which are surviving the onslaught of technology and rampant materialism. So, I remember some years ago, I had gone to a place in Uttarakhand, which is Ranikhet, where there is an extreme shortage of water. And I was pleasantly surprised to know that there was a spring that ran through that place, that cottage where we stayed, and somebody who was working for us, she went and stepped into the spring, and the village folk there, the mountain folk there, told her not to stand in that spring because that spring was sacred, the water was sacred. She should be very careful when she uses the water, and she should not dirty it by standing in it. So, you can understand this attitude is what can save the earth, and what can save its natural resources. Otherwise, there is no hope if the earth is considered as something that is a resource that must be used and thrown away. So, the earth needs respect and reverence according to spiritual ecology and according to Vaughan Lee. And the aim of spiritual ecology is to reconnect with the earth and regain the balance that is lost. Shazia, your book has inspired many students towards a commitment to heal the planet. Do you have any suggestions for them for further training and specialization in the subject abroad? So, when we answer the question, we'll go to the next lesson. Let's stop here. I hope we got a good idea of movements here, and we began the interview for Vaughan Lee. Let's meet in the next lesson. Thank you.